For the first time in United States history, a federal judge has ruled that the executive, the president, has violated the Posse Comitatus Act. This is from Judge Breyer. This is the Gavin Newsom case, that when he sued the federal government for doing this, for federalizing the National Guard for no reason. And Judge Breyer, who is, yes, the brother of Supreme Court Judge Breyer, is not shy. Now on page 2, he said clearly, Congress spoke clearly in 1878, when it passed the Posse Comitatus Act, prohibiting the use of U.S. military to execute domestic law. Nearly 140 years later, defendants, President Trump, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and the Department of Defense, deployed the National Guard and Marines to Los Angeles, ostensibly to quell a rebellion and ensure that federal immigration law was enforced. There were indeed protests in Los Angeles, and some individuals engaged in violence. Yet there was no rebellion, nor was civil law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. Nevertheless, at defendants' orders and contrary to Congress's explicit instruction, federal troops executed the laws. The evidence at trial established that defendants systematically used armed soldiers whose identity was often obscured by protective armor and military vehicles to set up protective perimeters and traffic blockades, engage in crowd control, and otherwise demonstrate a military presence in and around Los Angeles. In short, defendants violated the Posse Comitatus Act. Almost 3 months after defendants first deployed the National Guard to Los Angeles, 300 National Guards members remain stationed there. Moreover, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth have stated their intention to call National Guard troops in federal service to other cities across the country, including Oakland and San Francisco, here in the Northern District of California, thus creating a national police force with the president as its chief. That's exactly what he's doing. Because there is an ongoing risk that defendants will act unlawfully and thereby injure plaintiffs, Governor Newsom and the state of California. The court enjoins defendants from violating the Posse Comitatus Act as detailed below. So the judge laid it out bare. He even pointed to the military's own training, Task Force 51's training. Both the federalized National Guard troops and the U.S. Marines deployed to Los Angeles received training on the permitted scope of their activities under the Posse Comitatus Act. Unquotes, the standing rules on the use of force brief that was given by our legal personnel was given to every soldier and Marine that went on that mission. Task Force 51 training slides. The training materials for Task Force 51 provided that active duty military personnel may not provide direct assistance to civilian law enforcement authorities by performing law enforcement functions unless a constitutional or an act of Congress exception specifically permits it. Major General Scott Sherman, the Deputy Commanding General Support for U.S. Army and Commander of Task Force 51, oversaw the training of Task Force 51. At trial, he testified that his number 2 priority, after the troops' welfare and safety, of course, was to ensure that they followed the standing rules on the use of force exactly as was written. Accordingly, he ensured that the Task Force 51 troops knew that they weren't allowed to do any law enforcement actions. Law enforcement had to do it themselves. But we saw what happened. And in his brief, he even issued the prohibited law enforcement functions that was given to the troops. PCA, Posse Comitatus Act, prohibits active direct pursuit, arrests, apprehension, search, seizure, security patrols, traffic control, crowd control, riot control, evidence collection, interrogation, and informant. Additionally, the PCA, Posse Comitatus Act, prohibits any other activity where civilians are subjected to military authority that is regulatory, proscriptive, or compulsory. Other people that testified at this trial that said the soldiers, they were briefed on it, they knew that what functions they could do, what they couldn't do, the exceptions to the Posse Comitatus Act, but overall that they knew what they were supposed to do and what they weren't supposed to do. And then the judge, but you didn't do that, did you? Now the fight in this, which I learned from Michael Popak, is that the federal judge's power. So the federal judge, in a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, is allowed to do one of two things. They can issue fines. They can fine, which is not going to help here. Or they can go all the way into criminal mode, which, because of the fucking immunity ruling the Supreme Court gave them, doesn't really seem like that's going to help either. So the judge used his inherent authority to do what he had to do. So he made the declaration that the Posse Comitatus Act had been violated. He enjoined them to get them to stop doing it while this is taken up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and ultimately probably the Supreme Court. So, but good on him. Good on him for doing this, because these are the times that we're in. The Supreme Court has fucking just kneecapped justice, right? Like right out from under us. I mean, they've been stacking the court for 3 justices they have on there illegitimately, when it should have been our picks for justices, but they changed the rules and say, oh, well, we can't do that. And then they changed the rule back to take it. I mean, these Republicans have been just dirty fuckers for such a long time. They have been so immoral, dishonest, and they cheat. They cheat all the time. They're cheating right now all over the country, trying to redraw maps like crazy. They're so unpopular. Their policies are unpopular. Their town halls, they got congressional representatives running out the back door in shame. Well, it's shame, echoed after them. Who pays the tariffs? Who pays the tariffs? That was a good one. They know they're unpopular. All this shit is polling terribly. Like, the way that he's going about immigration raids, like 75% of people do not like it. I'll put up some of those statistics after this video. Thank you guys for watching. I love this. There's going to be a little bit of fight going up. He enjoined them from doing it, but he stayed the actual enforcement to the 12th to give it a chance to go up to the court, through the Court of Appeals. So